All right. There it is, guys. I see it in the upper left-hand corner. It's live. We're doing it. Welcome to Rants with Rich, Righteous Rants with Rich and usually Rob. First time talking about it. And check that out. 0 people watching right now. It's just us.
They don't want to see a righteous rant, apparently.
Oh, no. All of a sudden, it's 18 people. So, yeah, this is the first time that we're talking about it.
I don't see where you see that. I don't see that anywhere.
As I'm looking at the screen, up in the top left-hand side where it says live, right next to that is an I.
Oh, I don't see that. I just see live on the counter.
Oh, and that's probably
just on you.
Yeah, it's because this is my show. That's why. You only need to see what you need to see.
Bill True
Look at
is
Bill.
Awake.
Nice hats. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill. We got 20 people. We're stepping up. So yeah, we're here. We're doing it. Righteous Rants with Rich and usually Rob is the name I came up with. Because I've been talking for 18 months about, dude, we need to do a podcast. Searching all over for, the podcast kit and what do you need for a podcast and blah, 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 blah. And dude, I just realized the other day, I did a little research and this is a podcast. Like what we're doing essentially is a podcast. And I downloaded some software to pull the audio from these and then downloaded Anchor to upload and make a podcast. And so, hey, just that simply, we now have a podcast. So what I'm going to do is go back and take all of these. We did. And I'll take all these episodes and put them on the podcast so everybody can go back and listen to them. So I'm excited about that. It's fairly straightforward. It's just time consuming. So I will get there. And so part of it is having guests on. So Rob, I think you and I ranting is pretty good. It's enough to entertain most people, but I thought it'd be cool to get certain people on. And even before we started the podcast, we've been talking about getting this guy on. So Jason Blodgett, welcome to Rants with Rich and Rob.
I'm so honored to be the first guest under the official title.
So excited.
I didn't even think about that, dude. You are the first guest. So welcome. Cheers to you. I'm gonna crack open a Fit Aid. I don't know. There's probably something brown in your cup.
Clear and water.
Clear and water. Good for you. So how's your day going, Jay?
It's great. Just packing up some stuff. We're going to Florida this weekend. So
escaping some cold.
Yeah, I think it was like 15 today. It was really cold here.
It was like 17 here. So let everybody know where here is for you.
Yeah, so I'm based out of Indianapolis, just on the west side. We have a SRAM facility here in Indianapolis. So I work out of that office most of the time, but
okay.
I'm a frequent flyer.
So we're going to get into that. We'll go a little deeper into that. It's funny because down low, I was going to wait to get into these, but I think you'll appreciate it. All that bourbon behind you. We were just joking about all that bourbon. And this is also funny too. Let the super chats roll in. I don't even know. And I was joking about that earlier. I said, hey, I wonder if there's going to be any super chats. And we talked about who we would give that super chat money to. And we thought maybe we would let the guest decide that moving forward. So we're going to get there. And to answer you, Josh, yes, it's wear your SRAM hat to YouTube day. You notice I'm wearing the coolest of the SRAM hats here in the group. Don't read anything into that because it doesn't matter. Rob, how was your day, buddy?
My day was pretty hectic.
Pretty hectic. How so? Give us just a bit of insight.
Very hectic. Where do I begin? It's just, I think business owner stuff, when you have more demand than you have supply. Jason can appreciate that, I'm sure. It's just stressful trying to make ends meet, trying to work my way to the finish line so I can spend more time doing stuff with you. But every time I turn around, just the parking lot is full of wrecked cars, more people, more demand.
The finish line's moving.
Finish line is just running
away. Moving target.
Yeah, it's disappearing into the distance.
How is the weather, at least where you are?
It was in the low 60s today in the afternoon. I actually had to bring a pair of shorts to change into later in the day.
Man.
So it was t-shirt and shorts late in the day, but I did head into work with several layers and a beanie on. So
Yeah. And that was 45 degrees probably for you?
Actually 43, I think, when I got in my car.
Ooh, frigid.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for me, I woke up and I peeked outside with the sleep in my eyes to see a blanketing of snow out there. About 17 degrees when I remote fired up the transit to head to Wagner Creative Studios. So I went up to Carthage, which is about 75 minutes from here in Bentonville, to meet up with Brock for a few things. We shot a test video for Specialized for some product overviews. I don't know how it's going to work. We'll see. It was fun. I was a model. I got to be a Zoolander, which I appreciated. And then I had to sit at the computer and log all this footage, dude. Oh, that editing stuff is a nightmare, man. Like it's busy work, dude. It's just crazy. Yeah. So I had to go through and log a bunch of shots from a while ago for a project that we're working on. But then I also got to see the almost finished next how-to, and that's the rock garden how-to. Legit. And look at this. Shane Richardson. Boom.
$20.
There it is.
You're the king,
dude,
buddy.
Yeah, Shane's legit, man. He's this guy's been around a lot. I like it. He's got some good stuff coming. He always has great input, and the best part is that picture. Like every time it pops up,
he's got a great shot there.
That picture is legit. So Kurt Larson says, "Thanks for the great videos, guys, from Massachusetts." Where are you at in Mass, Kurt? Because I don't know if you.
I know a guy
this.
from Massachusetts.
I know two guys
from Massachusetts.
This guy and that guy, Rob, we're both from Massachusetts. So I'm going to go back to Shane's.
We're OG massholes.
Oh, I knew you were going to say it. So, dude, before we get any deeper, Jay, let's talk about, man, who are you? Who the hell is Jason Blodgett? I like to make it French. Give us some background, dude. Give us some background.
So a little background. Grew up in Ohio, way up north, right on the lake. Not a lot of mountain biking to be done there. Actually didn't touch a mountain bike till I was, I think, 15 or 16, to be honest. But grew up racing BMX. So that's kind of where the background comes from. But then didn't touch a bike for a few years, played ball sports, baseball, basketball, football. I think I'll still say that if I could go back and play basketball and keep playing basketball, I'd probably choose it over a bike, to be honest. I just love it. Not to say that I don't love riding bikes, because I do. But then went to Marion University in Indianapolis. So for those of you that know a little bit about cycling and collegiate cycling, Marion is one of the best schools in the country. So when I was there, we won 4 straight Division I national championships.
4
in a row. 4 in a row. But that was kind of my foot in the door at SRAM, actually. So
okay.
They had an internship program, and I know Bill is in here, Bill True. That's who I got thrown under and worked for Bill for about 5 years. So that's kind of my entryway into SRAM. But now I run and oversee our STU program for SRAM, which is SRAM Technical University here in the U.S. So we educate all of the bike shops in America how to work on our product. So all of the really in-depth techie stuff, taking apart shocks, seat posts, teaching folks how to do that is that's what I do every day.
Okay, so good. What we've gotten from you is you're athletic. We've also gotten you're pretty damn good on a bike.
I wish I had that video like queued up where I was following him.
Oh, dude. And he just took off.
Just gone like a missile. It looked like I turned it on fast forward. It was crazy.
So Bill True is actually who you were under when you started your internship, correct?
Correct. Yep.
And what Bill has to say is that you are one of the most naturally gifted athletes you've ever ridden with, golfed, or played basketball with. but your true skills and your ability to stay with others who are less able than you are. And I'm glad you have that skill because you've extended that to me a few times when we have ridden. So yeah, Jason.
I just told Bill that there were going to be some super chats and there was some money coming his way. That's why he went and
nice.
typed that.
That's funny.
We donated that super chat money to Bill True, please.
And speaking of that, we got another one, Miguel. Thank you for
Miguel,
$5. Buddy. Appreciate that. And you're going to get, actually, if you want to know how ShockWiz works, you got to do another $5. I'm kidding, buddy. I'm kidding. So one of the things, hopefully, that we're doing here is setting the stage for Jason's position at SRAM is such that he's got a wealth of knowledge. He's very in-depth with a lot of product. But at the same time, let's just go a little deeper, Jace, in your riding background, dude. Like your racing background. Just give us some highlights. A couple of racing highlights. What countries have you raced a bike in?
Canada, Costa Rica, the US. I'm sure there's a bunch that I'm missing, but I've ridden my bike in more places than I've raced my bike.
What level?
And I think that's so all of those were UCI races. So cross country stuff, and some stage races like down in Costa Rica. I went down and did a stage race. It was an absolute horrible experience. A bunch of 5'5" Colombians that weigh 85 pounds, watching them go uphill. It's just demoralizing when you're 6'4" and 180 pounds.
And that was then. You're 6'4" now. What are you weighing in now?
Oh, I'm like 190, 195 now.
Ooh,
I've been playing too much golf.
Wow.
Big boy.
So you've ridden at a pretty high level. You've raced some World Cups, cross country. You've raced some Enduros as well. So you are a very solid rider. And so when it comes to bike setup or suspension setup, things of that nature, you have some background, right?
Yeah, I didn't used to be super picky. I was more like Rich in setup on my bike. But once you understand all of the benefits that you can get from it, I've become more similar to Rob, and my setup is pretty particular on bikes and bike fit for that matter. So I know amongst the three of us, we've had a lot of those conversations.
Yes,
we have indeed. And that's something that I want to dive into here at some point. Let's just cover a few more things in regards to your position at SRAM. How long have you been there?
A little over 7 years.
Okay. So you've been around a decent amount of time, but I think it's important to note that you're not necessarily a Johnny come lately to this. Like the last 7 years, I think most people would agree is part of this incredible renaissance that we're experiencing in mountain biking. Would you guys agree in regards to bikes and technology and whatnot? I mean, we're going to talk about Flight Attendant. 4 years ago, I don't think any of us would have thought such a product would exist. So just trying to get a little bit more context. And what we're really trying to figure out here is what Austin asked. And that's, we're going to try to understand what it is you do exactly at SRAM, because I think your best gift is hiding that from people. We don't really know what it is that you do. So you go out, you do a lot of training. I'm assuming that has you traveling quite a bit.
Yeah, quite a bit. Obviously,
what does that look like?
The last couple of years, but I think in 2019, Bill made me fly 120 flights and 160 nights in hotels. So just because he didn't see me didn't mean I wasn't working.
Yeah. Yeah, this is great, Troy. What would you say it is that you do here? Well, Bill, I usually roll in about 30 minutes late.
No, that's for the Bobs.
Yeah. Oh, I know. But I'm using it in this context. Yeah. He's taught. Just stay with us. Stay with us there, buddy. Leave the humor to me. Okay.
So it's funny. I work really, really closely with Troy almost every day. And for those of you that don't know, Troy is probably the best bike mechanic on the planet.
I've heard that.
He worked with the Cannondale team, Leaky Gas team, Tour de France, tons of World Cup wins on the mountain bike side. So
yeah. Some would call him the real deal. As William True says. Okay, so some of that traveling takes you to Colorado Springs. Why is Colorado Springs important?
Yeah, so a ton of travel to Colorado Springs. That's where RockShox is. So that's where we do all of engineering development of any suspension product. And we also do brakes there. So going back and forth with a majority of what we do for servicing components is suspension related. So being in there, seeing what engineers are working on, why they did this and not something else, is really important. And then also in normal years, we run classes out of there for mechanics at shops. So they can come see Troy and I, and it's a 3-day class. It's 8, 9, 10 hours a day, and you just get overloaded with information. And Troy and I usually thoroughly enjoy a gin and tonic by the time Thursday rolls around.
I bet. Now, word on the street is that a lot of the engineers, pretty much everybody at, well, most SRAM offices around the country, but mostly Colorado Springs, word is that all those engineers are now much better positioned to test the product that's being designed. And I heard you had a major role to play with that, something called, what was it, Rob? The Ride Series MTB Skills Clinics,
Could have been
I
that.
think, came
Sounds
through.
familiar.
So some may not know, but we got to go around to a few of the offices and train the SRAM staff. And thankfully, Jason, you got to play a role in every single one of those. What were your thoughts on it?
It was amazing. And
Coach
you know,
Jason.
I've been to some of the Ride Series clinics before to help out and be around as well. So I kind of knew what to expect coming in, and I think everybody leaves, no matter who you are, feeling that you're a better rider, you're more confident, and you want to go ride your bike more. And I think that's all you guys are after.
Yeah.
For me, speaking for you, but
oh yeah,
that's the goal.
Yeah, and that was fun. And I have to share, this is the perfect segue for me to share my Jason Blodgett Ride Series story. We have a couple of them I'm not going to share on this forum. I think Jason knows one of them. But I had Jason come out to Bentonville to help me with a jump session in particular. And he'd never been to one. And we get through and it's late in the day and everybody's tired. And I've been joking about Jason and I having a jump off. And everybody's like, dude, let's go, man. We want to see the jump off. So we moved the MTB hopper back a little bit. Mind you, Jason's, I don't even know how much he's even seen one. He's never hit one. So he hits it a couple times and I'm like, you want me to move it back a little bit? He's like, yeah, sure. Move it back. So we move it back a little bit and we get ready to start the whole jump off. And I think it lasted about 7 minutes at the most. Because I moved it back a couple times. And then I think Jason got 2 or 3 jumps in and yanked the thing back to like 35 feet. And I kind of looked at him and I looked back at the group that was there and they're looking at me like, is this part of the script? And I said, he's going off script. I don't know what this is. This is improv at its finest. And dude, he just blasted it like it was nothing. So then I was grasping at straws and I'm like, well, let's have a scrub off. And that was foolish because at 7'3", yeah, he can scrub like nobody. So yeah, it was great to have him there. So, okay, let's do this then. Let's talk about some of the product. And what we have been talking about recently is Flight Attendant, but somebody asked about ShockWiz. And I think let's back up a little bit. And could we talk about ShockWiz, what it is, what it does, and then kind of roll into Flight Attendant? Are you okay with that, Rob?
I am. I was hoping I would get to share a Jason Blodgett story, but it's okay.
No, please.
We can go into business.
No, please. What is it better be a good story. I don't think it's going to be better than mine.
Well, it's story, anecdote. Well, basically,
okay.
There are many what I would call parlor tricks on the bicycle, things that are cool things to do under the category of like a wheelie. You know, it's something where it's not really a practical application for it, but it's cool when you can do it. And one of the most prestigious in my estimation is manualing. And yes. I've never been able to manual I'm struggling to try to do it now. I feel like I'm improving, but the reason it was so important for me to try to acquire that skill was because riding behind Jason, he shows you a way to make something that's a completely useless parlor trick into an effective tool every step of the ride. And it's so awesome to watch. And it's so frustrating to not be able to do it the way that he does it. So that's one of the reasons why. I mean, Rich, you could always manual, and I never really cared that I couldn't do it. But after riding a few times out here with Jason, I was like, I've got to get this figured out.
Oh, I'm glad I couldn't motivate you, but he can.
Well,
I get it.
I think
dude.
we can
I
agree.
Feel the same way.
He puts that skill to very, very good use, like nobody else I've ever seen.
Well, I think that's one of the best things about him, in my opinion. You know, you have a lot of good traits there, young man, but riding behind you is, dude, like when we rode in Colorado Springs, it's just so fun. Like there's just few people that I get to ride behind that are as dynamic as you on the bike, especially as tall as a human being as you are. That's really cool. So, okay, now that Rob's anecdote's over, let's talk about this. And remember Garrett's question here. I'm going to go back to it, but let's get into what is ShockWiz? What does it do? Why is it important? How does it help?
So ShockWiz is really just a suspension tuning tool. So all it's doing is reading your air pressure and putting it into an algorithm that's going to spit out information on your phone or whatever it might be, Bluetooth connected. And it's going to give you suggestions based on all of the information that's just taken in. So it's reading only air pressure at 1,000 times a second. So all of those ramps in air pressure are going to spit out different pressure readings, PSI readings. And so those go through the device itself. It has a pressure sensor built in, and then it's going to spit out whatever it thinks you should do or changes that you should make based on the algorithm that we created.
Okay. Rob, do you have any experience with ShockWiz?
No, Jason was going to send me one, but I think it got lost in UPS. But I got to say, it's always struck me funny that you could extrapolate tuning information based off one thing, which is a fluctuation in air pressure. And it seems to me that the algorithm would have to have been written by someone who has an opinion about what right is. And that's the thing that's always had me skeptical, because I run my stuff super fast. And as we learned when Micah and I got together, his setup is completely 180 degrees opposite of mine. So I don't know how a device like that could give either of us beneficial information when we prefer something that's completely polar opposite.
Yeah. So when you set up the device, it'll ask you how you want your suspension to react. So do you want it to be really playful? Do you want it to feel like you have more traction, or you're glued to the ground a little bit more? There's some settings that are in there that are going to alter the algorithm. So depending on what you like in your ride style, it's going to spit out a little bit different information. But basically, if you don't have your spring rate or your air pressure correct, none of those things matter.
Gotcha.
That's
so it doesn't help you necessarily with that. You've got to get your sag set up on your own. And
yeah, and it will. It'll help you get to that air pressure. It'll let you know you plug in the serial number or the model of your fork, and it knows right away, hey, you're riding 150 travel pike, you should be at 25, 20, whatever it might be, sag from there, and it'll accommodate to that.
And there's an app for that, right? There's an app that helps you with setup. What's that called?
Yep, it's just ShockWiz.
Okay. So if you get that app, that gives you a solid starting point.
Yeah, and there's another app if you don't have a ShockWiz. It's called Trailhead, and you can go in and you can plug in what fork you have, and it'll give you what your weight is, and it'll give you a baseline for your air pressure and where your rebound should be to start. And that's just a baseline, and then you can go from there and find changes, customize, do whatever you want to make it your own.
and we're going to dive into that, and we're going to use you two and your setup as an example. So now we've moved on from ShockWiz, and now it's the era of Flight Attendant. I still don't know a ton about what Flight Attendant is. I don't know that Rob does. Can you give us a breakdown, high-level breakdown? What is Flight Attendant?
Yeah. So we like to talk about it in a couple different ways, but I think the most digestible way is talking about how simple the system is to start. So you have two different pieces. You have the hardware, which is, think of that as like your Lyric, your Zeb, your Pike. And then you have your rear shock, obviously, which is a Super Deluxe. And then you have the software side of things. And that's where the motor module comes in and plays a big factor into this. So you have a control module on your fork. You have a motor module on your rear shock, which I have here. And then you have a pedal sensor that sits inside of the dub spindle on your cranks. And so it's taking in inputs from all three of those and making active suggestions and changes to your suspension while you're on the fly. So setting it up is really simple. It's important, and it's required that you do a calibration. So basically the calibration is taking in where everything is in space. So it knows basically what the head angle of your bike is, where your rear shock is positioned. So it's a really, really complex system when we start digging into it. Yeah. But one of the things that we do internally when we have people go out and ride it is we make them go ride it first. And so they can see how simple the system is, and it's making changes for you. So everybody always asks the question of, well, how quickly can it react? Is it faster than me pressing a button, twisting a lever, whatever it might be to make changes to the compression? The answer is it's way, way faster than you. So it's making a decision every 5 milliseconds. So for reference, it takes you 300 to 400 milliseconds to blink. So in the time you blinked, it's made 80 different decisions and where it is in space and what it's doing, and then it can react from there. So it's a really, really neat system. It's taken a long time. This has been in development for over 7 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. That was going to be my next question, was how long has it been in development? What sort of role did you play in the development?
So we kept this really under wraps because we didn't want people to see it. So basically the only people that were riding it were engineers and then very select people on our test team. So we have a pool of riders all over the globe, and they are on our global test team. And they sometimes get early access to product to give feedback to. So these are people that have usually been referred to us through other SRAMies or other folks in the industry that have good input on product. So that's how all of our, yep. And I know Rob saw it prior, just out and about. But my role was pretty minimal here. It wasn't a ton of things. I got the product a couple months before launch and put it to the test. I think the first ride I did on it was off the top of Pikes Peak all the way down to Colorado Springs. So,
and what was that like?
So on that ride, because you're going downhill so much, it stays open. A lot of times there is a climb in the middle where it'll fluctuate between an open, a pedal, and a lockout mode. And those are the three modes that are in the system. But when you get somewhere really busy, like where we rode in Colorado Springs at Ute, where there's a lot of lifts, there's a lot of drops, there's a lot of up and down undulating terrain there, that's where it's absolutely amazing, because it's making so many changes so frequently where you can really see the benefit of the system. So,
okay. Let's I want to drill down a little bit on each of you guys. Just very quickly, somebody named Kate McDougall says hi. So I wanted to bring that up. And yes, Bill, Kate is here, and I think JB is going to be on his best behavior either way. Let's take each of you and your preferences in suspension setup and kind of frame it under this context of what is Flight Attendant going to be like. You said you've gotten a little bit more particular about your setup recently. Give us a quick overview of what you prefer in your suspension setup.
Yeah, so I think I'm a lot like Rob, where I like things to be really active. I like rebound to be pretty on the quick side, and I pretty much always just dial in low speed compression until it stops, and that's kind of how I like my setup to be. But with this system in the new bikes that are coming out, I think some of those changes that I always had made were filling in for something lacking maybe on the bike's end, the design. Whereas now when we get into these new bikes, there's not a bad bike anymore. There really isn't. There's all these different options that are suited for different types of riders. But I think one of the best things about Flight Attendant is when you have a Flight Attendant bike, you don't really have to worry about how well it pedals. And that was always one of the things that was the biggest takeaways for me coming from a cross-country racing background is I always looked at how a bike pedaled before anything. And now I'm starting to look at bikes that maybe go downhill a little bit better, because I know I can make up with that with Flight Attendant, where it gives you more compression settings and it's always active and allowing you to pedal a little bit better on some of those platforms. So I think it's really the best of both worlds.
Is that potentially a sliding scale? Meaning, will it mask maybe a bike that doesn't pedal so well and make a bike that already pedals well that much better? Or is it kind of give and take depending on what it already does? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. In my opinion, I think it makes any bike pedal better.
Okay.
So I know you had a little bit of experience on the Genius, and I actually had some Flight Attendant on the Genius, and it felt like a cross-country bike. It was absolutely insane.
Yeah, right? I'm having a hard time comprehending that because I know how well that bike pedaled, and for it to be even better. I just threw a comment up here for Rob. It's pretty funny. I agree with you. Hey, there we go. We got one. Okay, so
sorry,
Rob, what do you think? What do you think about what Jason's been saying? How do you think it's going to work with you?
Well, I had ridden a system from a competitor, and I don't like the idea of something adjusting my suspension that's not me. Yep. And I've always people ask me all the time, do I lock my suspension out when I'm climbing? And I typically run it open. And the reason is because I like to use the oscillation of the suspension to assist me, especially on lifts. But what's funny is with my current fleet of large bikes, starting with the Firebird, I started locking it out or putting it in the climb position just to see how it would change the bike. And it seems that most companies have gotten to the point where they aren't making a locked out platform anymore, and the bike still has a ton of compliance, even though it provides more support. So for me, the downside is, I don't know if you saw, there was a video I posted of going down Corona recently behind Alex.
Yeah.
My shock was locked out the whole time. And it didn't even occur to me during the ride. It wasn't like I noticed suddenly, oh, the bike's handling terrible. I didn't even realize until I went to turn it on later when I was going to climb something, and it was locked out the whole time. And so that's a circumstance for me where something like Flight Attendant would be great because you don't have to turn it on and you don't have to turn it off. It's standing by to deliver those changes on the fly when you need them, probably before you realize you need them.
Okay, so Cody, great question, and that's where I'm going with this is I'm trying to provide some context here. And Tony asked a great question too, because he asked, is Flight Attendant, would it help the average rider? I think it would definitely help the average rider. I think it'll probably help everybody, but I think, and Jay, you can chime in, it might be better for the average rider because the assumption is the average rider doesn't quite understand where their settings should be. And I think the reason SRAM, you spent 7 years developing this, and who knows how much money was to help the average rider or to help any rider, because it seems like the big conundrum within mountain biking is, man, how do I set my suspension up? And I think that is a very valid question for a lot of people. And I think Rob said it multiple times. And Jason, you alluded to it at the beginning of this. You didn't really care much, but now you've gotten much more focused on what you prefer as a rider. And I think that plays into this. There are those empiricals of, there are things that just make sense for everybody, just in the way the suspension functions. And then from there are particulars that each person wants. And that, I think, is probably the question. And that was my question is, if it's Flight Attendant, how does it know what you want? Like, flight attendants, man, they serve you drinks. You got all that bourbon back there. How do they know which bourbon you want? Is it just a case for this is bourbon? Here's bourbon. Here you go.
Well, my flight attendant girlfriend was here. She's flying.
Yes. Yes. So
one of the things built in Flight Attendant that I think is potentially the coolest thing is the bias adjustment. So
okay.
somebody like Rob, so there's 5 different settings in the bias. So what the bias is going to do is change how frequently the system goes into pedal and lock mode. So somebody like Rob would probably like it more in the minus setting versus somebody like me who wants the bike to pedal really well on the plus side. So that's going in and fine tuning the system and how frequently it goes to lockout. And that's really one of the coolest pieces and one of the best adjustments you can make. And it's not a one size fits all for everything, but it's really amazing because you can change it from different trail system to different trail system.
And is it an really adaptive system? Like, does it learn your behavior or no?
It does not. Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, that's next level, dude. Like that's getting out there a bit. Somebody at some point asked, Tony did, what's the cost? Brian's helping. The price is not for the average rider. Yeah, of course not. I mean, 7 years developing and who knows how much money. I'm sure it's not cheap right now.
Yeah. And so all of the bikes that are currently launched, we launched with 4 partners for Flight Attendant, and they're coming on OE only bikes currently. So not available in the aftermarket. There's a couple big reasons for that. The first one is shock fitment on bikes. So you have a motor module and it makes the shock a little bit bigger. It's not going to fit onto every bike. And then also when you offer it in an aftermarket setting, it's got to have a bunch of different compression tunes and forces, lockout forces, and those kinds of things where that's where things get really messy. So at this point, we're OE only on select brands, Specialized, Canyon, YT, Trek.
So you guys have put in the time to develop the platforms for each of their models that they're running it on?
Yep, and that's the same thing we do with everybody. I know your backyard, Rob, is a really hot spot for us and what we do with a lot of the suspension tuning for bikes. So when I'd
love to help with that. If there's anybody that I could talk to,
take a hint, Rob.
If it was up to me, I'd let you. So bike companies come to us and say, hey, we have this really cool new bike. What shock do you think is going to work best on this bike? And we go out and we take a ton of different shocks with us and just flip them back and forth, let a bunch of people ride them from those companies and from our company. And then they give feedback on which shock feels the best and works the best under that bike. And that's how we determine what goes with where.
Now, talking about that, I'm not going to necessarily put you on the spot. Are you at liberty to talk about what bike you're riding now and what your thoughts are on that bike?
Yeah.
Or does it matter?
I have a bunch of bikes, but I've been riding an a Stump Jumper Evo lately.
Stump Jumper Evo. You look like you were having a lot of fun on that bike.
It's really fun. I had ridden it initially, wasn't super stoked on it. Put Flight Attendant on it, and it feels like a rocket ship. It's
so
amazing.
What weren't you initially stoked on, dude? Because I have mine, and dude, I think it's so rad.
The bee's knees.
So
yeah.
Yeah. So with those bikes and the way that the leverage ratio goes in the curve for myself, I have to chuck the thing full of bands and tokens and everything with a high volume can to get it to do what I want to do. So it doesn't sit so far in the travel when you're pedaling. I just felt like you set the sag to, 25, 30%, and that's where it just hung out.
Okay.
And I wanted it to ride a little bit higher in the travel when pedaling. And so being able to have Flight Attendant make those compression changes, and you don't have to reach down and flip a lever.
So you just, that allows you to get the support through compression?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think there's, is that like a product of your environment sort of thing? I mean, dude, you were a former high level cross country rider. You're pretty dialed into a solid pedaling platform. Maybe not everybody feels that same way. It's tough to say. Right. Is the plan, I would imagine, for it to trickle down into the aftermarket world, or just trickle down to where at some point you could buy it, or is that going to be a while? Because there's a lot of factors in regards to fitment.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. A lot of those fitment things coming down the road, and then of course we've got to deal with inventory and product availability first. So there's nothing we're not working on.
Okay, I wish I would have looked at this one, because this is a lot to unpack right here. Justin says, while this system would help the average rider taking the complexity out of a bike setup, would it also hurt the average rider in learning how to set up a bike as well? I'm going to let you guys take that one.
I don't think it would hurt. I really don't.
I think you still have to set the bike up.
You do. Yep. And setup is exactly the same. So setting your rebound, it's still an external control, but the internal controls are all those compression adjustments.
Rob, Cody Weber's got your number, dude.
What's funny is I just had this conversation with somebody else who has a similar bike, and I ran it. They're like, "Hey, what's your setup?" And I gave them like a full paragraph breakdown of every single thing.
And they're just like, "No, dude, no, too much, too much."
No, they tried running my stuff, and they were like, "Wow, dude, my bike."
Well, really... was it with Chris? Was Chris Tame who you had that?
Chris is one person who I've,
because he said he's really happy with the results in regards to what wireless brakes. Andy, how dare you? We're talking suspension here. So Pat has a good question here. He's talking about, is the plan to make the product smaller to fit more bikes? Is that something you can even speak to? Do you know?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure.
I was going to say, with technology, the package will likely get smaller, making it easier to fit in a wider range of bikes, which would probably make that an easier choice for SRAM, I would think.
Yeah. Hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. You never know. You may know, but obviously there's only so much you could say. Let's kind of
see in his eyes he's telling us the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got nothing.
Yeah, let's move out of this a little bit, and I think go old school and talk about some suspension setup things. And Cody's highlighted one potential issue with setup, and that's people not checking what their air pressures are on a regular basis. Let's back up a little bit. You got a brand new bike, dude. You're all fired up. Jason, what's the first thing you have to do when you're getting your suspension set up?
First thing for me is I'm going to put tokens in it, because I know that's what I need from my end, just how I ride, my style of riding. I've ridden enough different bikes and built enough bikes over the years where I know kind of a baseline of what I need.
So let's back up a little bit then. So let's assume somebody on here just heard you say tokens, and they're like, "What is it, a video game, dude? He's putting tokens in his bike? I don't understand how that works." Let's back up before we even get to tokens. The average rider, they get their bike, they're rushed out of the shop, or it's a direct-to-consumer brand like a YT. In their garage, they get it put together. What are they looking to do? What's your quick and dirty input to them to get their bike set up?
Yeah, so first thing is going to be sag. That's what it's always going to be. When you get a bike out of a box or from a bike shop, they should know, or the information should be there for the rear suspension where they want you to have that sitting at sag. So that all of that information is always going to come from the bike manufacturer, not us at SRAM, because we don't take the time to dial everything and check every single bike under the sun to see what the sag should be or shouldn't be. But for suspension in the front end, that's a little bit of a different story, where we can go to Trailhead. You can type in the serial number on the back of your fork and get recommendations straight from there on your bike. It knows, right, if it's, as long as it hasn't changed travel, or you still have the same damper in the fork straight out of the box. Yeah. All of that information is stored within our system, and we let you take a peek at anything. You can see offset, wheel size, travel adjustments, and those kinds of things. And it'll also give you that air pressure readout to let you know, hey, you should probably be at about 30% sag. At your weight, this is 75 PSI. Okay. And so, Rob, do you have any input there?
Well, what I was going to say, so you and I have talked in the past about when you're setting your sag, typically 25 to 30% is kind of the number that you hear.
Typically.
And I've always said that reasons that I prefer every bit of 30% normally. I like the bike to sit lower because it gets the CG down. But I live and ride in a place where there's a lot of rocks and a lot of places to pedal strike. And so if you find that pedal striking is an issue for you, you can run less sag, which is going to lift the bike off the ground. The other thing I'd like to run by you, Jason, is different manufacturers with different kinematic platforms probably might desire more or less sag, depending on how much of the travel is their anti-squat factor to maybe set the bike past that, so it's more compliant. Would you agree with that?
Yep, absolutely. 100% spot on.
So Rob, what about this though? You just said where your preference is more on the 30% side of things.
Mm-hmm.
What's been your experience with downcountry bikes in regards to sag, and with input from Red Mountain Goat, what have you done?
So he gave me some great input. Typically, I wouldn't focus as much on the pressure as I would on the sag. And so on the shorter travel bikes and on some shock platforms, he's encouraged me to run my body weight plus a certain number of pounds of air.
Yes.
And under his guidance, I've found circumstances where more pressure works better for me.
And is that something that was a bit counterintuitive to you in the beginning when he was saying
absolutely.
that?
Yeah. When we went to Spain and I had the new Switchblade, I was running it way too soft. And so one of the problems was it was riding too deep in the stroke. And although I didn't have a problem with pedal striking, I had it sitting too low for it to pedal effectively.
Yeah.
And that was where he kind of stepped in and said, look, you need to do this.
Okay, so I think that's an important thing for people to get, is as dialed in as you are, as steeped as you are in suspension setup, it's still somewhat fluid, bike to bike and kind of scenario to scenario. You're still learning and adapting, so to speak.
Yeah, well, and I think Jason hit the nail on the head. The manufacturer knows how their bike's going to work the best, and you may have a preference, what you like or typically prefer, but you want to start with what the manufacturer says, because that's where the bike's going to work best. And then if you want to deviate from that, if you feel the need to deviate from that, or your preference is to deviate from that, then you deviate from that if you want. But you always are best to start with what the manufacturer says.
And Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you guys are manufacturing a 150 Lyric, they're basically the same, right? There's not light person 150 Lyrics, average weight 150 Lyrics, and Clydesdale 150 Lyrics, right?
Nope, they're all exactly the same.
So the idea is they should work decently for a tiny person or a very heavy person.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
Now, Pat says, do tokens help if I'm bottoming out?
Yes.
Yes. And so what are tokens in this scenario?
I was just going to touch on that with and kind of ask Jason's opinion on this. I have said in the past, Jason, that I'll typically do like you said, where I'll put volume spacers in circumstances I know that I'm going to need them. But if I put the setup, let's say I add a volume spacer or token, and I go out and ride, and I typically run my stuff just wide open, almost no damping, either compression or rebound. And if I find myself blowing through the stroke and bottoming, I will add compression damping depending on the circumstance to prevent that problem. But then when I get back, I'll add another volume reducer and pull the compression back out. My philosophy is the spring rate and the ramp has got to be right, and you don't want to mask that with damping if it's wrong.
So that's
100%.
Okay, so now Drogos is asking, to what degree pressure and rebound overlap? So he says, can he compensate higher pressure preference with a slower rebound? Which it kind of seemed like that's what Micah said he was doing. Am I wrong?
Well, you can do that, but the problem may be you don't have enough volume spacers in the thing, and that's why you need higher pressure to prevent bottoming. The problem's likely ramp and not pressure. Does that sound right, Jason, or am I talking out of my butt?
Yeah, I think that's where it gets kind of into the weeds a little bit, is what you actually need for tokens. But I like the way that you go about it and going out and trying to make sure your spring rate is correct to begin with. So a little overview, I guess. Tokens are their volume spacers. So what they do is they take up space in the chamber, in the air of your fork, your rear shock, and allow it to, say if you kept the same pressure. So if you felt like you were blowing through travel, you put 1 or 2 tokens in and you put the same pressure in, you might not feel like you're bottoming out as much anymore, and it might not be as evident. And that's kind of what you're looking for in that circumstance, where a token will let it still be soft off the top if you're running the same pressure. So think of it like Rich was doing the ramp. So it's changing the ramp and that curve and where it is. So as you compress the fork more or the rear shock, that pressure builds, and at some point it's going to stop you or you're going to bottom out. So going through and changing those and playing with them is a really good tool, because again, it's not going to be one size fits all.
Yeah, and I think when you try to compensate for bottoming with pressure, the initial becomes very harsh, unless you do it with a ramp adjustment.
We talked about this on the Righteous Rants with Rich and Usually Rob podcast, all new to the Spotify marketplace. I'm not ashamed to say I listened to one, and I think it was the first episode, number 1. I listened to it on the way up to Brock's this morning, and you talk about that. You talk about a new bike and basically how you prefer to run everything as open as possible, because if it's open, it can function. It can essentially breathe.
Yeah, now, the valving is inside. It's not in the adjusters.
Yes. And I think that might be a very important thing to reiterate. And we've done that many times. Like, I think some people run a bunch of compression. Like, you've been on me to get that 34 off my ISO, because I keep adding more pressure. I've added every token or every volume reducer, in a Fox that it says I can do. And I have all of the compression.
Yeah,
and I can ride it.
It's not designed to do what you're doing with it.
It does not want my thunder. So for, I think, most people, and Cody, Cody's question here, I think is a decent one. After the initial setup, token, sag, PSI, does it become mostly a PSI game at that point, or do you always check sag? And I think, in theory, if you know what your number is, you should be able to check your number and you should be good to go. Right? Or wrong?
Well, sag is, in my experience, sag is what determines the pressure. So you don't arbitrarily pick a pressure number.
No, but once you have
starting out,
once you've set it and once you know where it's at, then you're going off that that pressure number. You don't have to adjust your sag, check your sag every time. I think that's the question. I don't know. I could be wrong.
Oh, no, I would agree with that. If you're just checking your suspension and you've already figured out what pressure the sag is right at, yeah, I don't think you have to necessarily check your sag every time. Just check the pressure, make sure it's right.
Well, and this is a great one too from Chris. And Chris, this is why we're doing this. This is why Jason is on here. This is why probably the most common question we get is about suspension. And I can only hope that the insight that we're giving helps people like it has helped you, as you have said. You know, it's one of those things. My only, I think, response to this is if more people would take the stance of they don't know and really do some due diligence and try to figure it out, I think they'd be much better. But I can tell you my experience is, dude, there's a lot of suspension experts out there, a lot. And it's just kind of funny to listen to, well, and again, I mean, I've said this before. I've heard people give me these preferences on suspension, and I'm thinking, wow, like that's gnarly. Like this person must rip, and they must have ripped for a long time to have this deep feel for what their suspension needs to be. And I watch them ride, and I just go, huh, interesting. Like they're not really going fast enough for the suspension to really do anything. So it's interesting to me. Okay, what about?
Well, and I think a lot of it, you know, this is one of those situations where there's not necessarily a right. There's a what's right for you, but it's important to know what you're after, because if you don't know what you're looking for, you won't recognize it when you see it.
Well, and this is a prime example. Pat Hoffman says adds rebound, right? I think he's referring to tokens, and our good friend Garrett Hubbard of GH Studios here in the mountain bike capital of the world has chimed in to say, no, this is not a rebound thing. And I think Jason has picked up on it. So how about this one? Chris says, am I right in saying compression clickers, etc., are there for the ability to cover a majority of users to in some way offer simplicity on the fly? Most people won't think to add tokens to adjust ramp.
And typically you can't do it on the trail.
No. Well, if you have an MRP ramp control, then you could, but you would have to seek that out. And just because most people won't think to add tokens to adjust the ramp doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do.
And the other thing is, I don't think most people know if they're bottoming and they add compression when what they really need is to add a volume spacer. They add the compression and they think they've set their suspension instead of going back home and changing the ramp to be able to take the compression back out.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to take it out or you have to start again. Like one of the things
I don't think you have to take it out, but for me, if I leave it in, then the bike's harsh.
Well, yeah. And I don't know that you don't want any more compression than you theoretically need, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no reason to have any more. But one of the things I took from Micah was if you add in a volume reducer or a token, don't up the pressure. Stay at the same pressure and see if that makes the difference. Yeah. And I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, well, and usually if you add pressure, you're not going to be able to get your sag number.
Keith, fork for the Izzo. I'm going to go with a 170 Zeb.
Dual crown.
I'm kidding. I'm going to go. I have a 150 36 that came off the Delano Peak. So I am going to throw that on there and see how that works.
Jason, I'll tell you, exclusively RockShox.
I would, if I could get a Pike, I would love to have a 140 Pike on there. That would be the way to go. Yeah. So how about this? Drogos. He's 2 out of 4 tokens in the fork. Plush up top, blows through first half of suspension too easy, but then it ramps up very aggressively. Does he need more tokens?
If it has a spike, if it ramps up aggressively, it has a spike, I would say you'd want to take one out.
Okay.
Would you agree with that, Jason?
Yeah, I would think you would take one out, add more air pressure in that circumstance. So where it's not, when you take one out, I think you would need potentially there to add a little air pressure.
Yeah, especially if it's blowing through the top.
Correct.
Okay, we have a statement here from somebody named Masson de de Carrel. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that. Just kidding, Mason. Megnag air can on Flight Attendant. Mind blown. I don't know what he's saying there. What is a Megnag, and how does it work, Jason?
So a Megnag is just another air can that we offer. Basically, you're adding more negative air volume. So you have positive air volume and negative air volume. By adding in that negative air volume and increasing that, you're going to have a little bit better small bump sensitivity. And then your positive air pressure is slightly bigger in that instance as well, but you're adding more air to the shock itself. And then in that negative chamber, allowing it to still be really soft off the top, but still have a lot of progression as you get through the travel. So you see a lot of those, like the Trek World Cup downhill team has been running them on their air shocks for quite a while.
Okay.
So we offer it in select sizes for select shocks as an aftermarket tuning kit.
Does that make sense, Rob? I know you had some questions at one point about.
Yeah, no,
Megnag.
I understand. I understand how the Megnag works. Basically, it will allow you to run higher pressure. As the shock is extended, the negative pressure side is high. And so it allows the initial compression to be easier, but as it compresses, the pressure on the negative side drops, which steps up the resistance on the positive side. Is that a pretty accurate description, you think, Jason?
Yep, I think so.
Okay, so this is a pretty good one here, I think. Once you get your sag and your tokens correct, to get the ramp up, as Rob was talking about, at what point do you need to mess with the compression settings?
So I think the way that Micah described it to us was pretty awesome. Basically,
yes,
low speed compression would be how you interact with the bike. So in other words, if you're coming into a corner and you feel like the bike, like when you try to pump a corner, the bike's not supporting you, you could add a little bit of low speed compression to create that support. If something that the trail is doing to the bike is kind of overpowering it, that's where you would use a high speed compression adjustment to resist that. Does that sound pretty accurate, Jason, or did I misunderstand what Micah was telling us?
Yeah, I think of it a little bit differently. I think of it as low speed is slower shaft speed. So think of bigger hits at that point, like coming off a jump and landing, or off a drop and landing, and you want that support on those hard, slower shaft speed hits. That's when you would dial in a little bit of low speed if you wanted more compression there. And think of high speed as like braking bumps or chatter that's coming across the trail when you're coming with a little bit more speed, and that shaft speed's a little bit higher on that, and that's when you would adjust your high speed.
Robert, I love hearing this, man. The water is making its way through the granite, especially since I've been watching a lot of Cobra Kai recently. This very Miyagi-Do right here. So he says the info's making its way in, and I like that. I like that a lot. Look at this guy, Jay in the AVL. Smash the like. I got to get better at this YouTube stuff.
Smash it.
Yeah. So Cody says, more simply asked, what are the setting adjusters for then? I think we've broken down a decent amount, but Rob, go ahead, go a little deeper.
Well, what I would say is they are there to help you make it work how you prefer it to work. The problem is most people don't know what that is.
Okay, so then let's use this as an example. Keith asked me what I was doing on the Izzo. He has the same Izzo. He's going to keep the 34 on his because he rides more XC like Irwin Park in Texas. And Keith, you probably will have
XC,
no issue.
It'll be great. Yeah, it'll be great.
Yeah,
if you're jumping 30 feet off of a if you're dropping 30 feet off of a
what I'm doing
off a wooden ramp, you're going to have trouble with it probably.
Yeah, and I would agree with Chris here. Most average riders have a mindset like me, and they just want to ride it. But that doesn't mean it's right. I can certainly tell you, yeah, that's my mindset, but it's cost me a lot of time. And I've done a lot of due diligence over especially the last 2 years as somebody who's reviewing bikes to get a little bit better. with setup because I feel it's my obligation to. And we say this all the time at the clinics. We go down this road, and Rob can get very deep. He can get very off in the weeds, and we try to give people just enough to give them the insight that they need to get their bike set up decently, and maybe discern where they need to go, and then check the pressures. That's it. We give them the opportunity to come back to us with questions, but my take on suspension is you could certainly go way in depth on this, and you could be like Rob, where you know where everything is. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but yeah, if you're somebody who doesn't want to really mess with it and ride your bike, that's fine. Get it to where it should be, and then just check it periodically. I think that's a fair statement. You guys agree?
Well, the problem is where it should be. You know,
Well,
for everybody's
what I'm
sake, it's gonna
assuming
be
is they
best
get a
if it
baseline
performs.
setting. Yeah. So if somebody gets to where it's performing pretty well, check your pressures, make sure it's there. Clean your stanchions. If you're 150 hours in on the bike, maybe get a bath oil service, things like that. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's what I was just going to lead to, is the service too. I know you guys don't keep bikes long enough to service suspension, but on RockShox's product, an air can and a lower leg fork service is every 50 hours of ride time.
Yeah, and it makes a huge difference when you do it.
Huge difference.
It's like a new pair of socks.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a bummer right now because I thought I was getting my Epic Evo and my Spur serviced, but the kits for the SID apparently are on back order. Jason, can you do something, man? Come on, bro. Find me some kits, dude. I need that plushness back. So in regards to suspension, I think more and more people now are starting to get a little bit better feel for it. What, in your opinion, Jason, as far as suspension goes, what's the sweet spot for you in regards to travel on a bike? What do you like the most, do you think?
That's tough. I think I have all of the bikes from all the travel ranges.
Yeah. Or at least now. What right now is like the wheelhouse, the bike you're going to?
I love like a 140, 150, 160 bike, somewhere in that range. I feel like you can do anything on it. If you need to go ride 4 or 5 hours and you got to pedal up there or do whatever to get to that spot to ride, and it's still really worth it. Those bikes pedal so well anymore, and you can kind of take them anywhere.
Yeah.
That being said, I do have a new Spark on the way, which is going to be 120, 120.
Dude, I saw one. I saw one yesterday. Local girl was riding it, and she came by, and it looked so mean. Like, good looking bike.
Yep. I'm super excited.
Yeah. What about you, Rob? I know what bike you're liking right now, but generally, what do you?
Well, I've always said that I think a 140, 160 29er for me is kind of the ideal bike. You can have a light set of spare wheels where you can do XC rides and all day rides, or you could put something strong on there. And most of the new bikes are so capable.
Yeah.
There's not much that you have to check yourself on because they just handle it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, man. It's
perfect
tough.
Example is the Delanos. We took those things. We took those things into some deep water, and they just handled it.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is a great one. Hari says he loves the Lyric and the 36 is comparable. I think now the 36 is getting there. But he's got a 34 on his Ripley, and it's not his favorite. Yeah, a Pike would be way stiffer and way more supportive. Yes. You can certainly tune the 34, but let me just give you my take on this before Rob jumps in. Regardless of support and damping on the 34, my main challenge is it twists. It deflects side to side.
Yeah.
And if I load a 34 up, dude, it's like it wants to shoot me right off the trail. And that is the most challenging for me. I could deal with periodic bottom out. It doesn't happen all the time. It's violent when it does, but I could back it down a little bit to remove that. But I think the challenge for me is the way I ride, especially in Bentonville right now. There's a lot of turns that have mild berms that I can just load into them. And dude, that thing just goes boom, boom, wherever it wants to go. And I've never had that happen with the Pike. I've never had it happen with the Sid, like the Sid on the spur. I could smash that thing into anything, dude, and it goes exactly where I want it to go. So yeah. And Garrett just kind of backed it up. Garrett said he ran a 140 Pike on his Ripley, and it was awesome.
Yeah, I never noticed much of a difference deflection wise between the Pike and the Lyric. And the only time I ever noticed any deflection on either of those was after I rode a Zeb.
Oh yeah, dude, it's amazing.
Come off the Zeb and you're like, wow, these kind of do move a little bit compared to that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I agree with Austin. Modern short travel trail bikes are just legit. I mean, I've been going to the Izzo quite a bit recently, and I dig it. Let's move a little bit. And actually, wait a minute. Let's get to this. I keep forgetting these things.
Boom.
Pat Hoffman.
Thanks, Pat.
Hopefully he's still here. It's all right. Thanks, dude. We appreciate him being here. And then our man Casey's back.
Boom,
he had a lot.
Yeah, buddy.
He had a lot to add on the last one. He loves long travel bikes. He just got on a Kenevo SL. That looks like a really cool bike. And he's got the Zeb Ultimate. So, yeah. Cody had a great one, though. And we're kind of segue out of suspension into some other things. How important are tires for the terrain? And what's your perfect all-around tire? Jason, what do you think, dude?
I think they're super important.
Yeah.
I think not so much the tread and the layout, but more so the casing of the tire itself. And I know you guys talk a lot about that as well, but depending on where you're riding, it could be totally different. But I've been running a couple different sets. More recently, the Butcher Eliminator combo, which I know Rich has been riding a little bit, and then the Kenda Pinner, which I really love. It's a little bit more robust than the Specialized tires. So if I was coming out to ride with Rob, that's probably what I would ride, just to try to mitigate breaking wheels and stuff on rocks.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny. Casey talked about not wheels or wheel set, but you and I, Jason, have talked about the Zip wheels, and I think that you've always said to me that it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it does. So with the Zip wheels, they're 3.0 motos. They have built-in compliance, so it's a single wall rim. So think of it, the inspiration comes from dirt bikes, and when you lean it over on the side or you side load, where the rim actually will articulate an angle around the spoke, so that way you keep more tire patch on the ground itself. So I found, like, when it's really loose, they're very, very good. And then especially when you get into things off camber, I feel like I can go places where other people can't, simply because I have the traction from those wheels.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I haven't had the chance to get on them yet, but thanks, Rico. We appreciate your super chat there earlier, dude. And
Rico. Thanks,
we'll
buddy.
catch you on the next one. So, it's Haris brings up another great point about the price of tires and where you ride and how many tires you go through. I was a Maxxis guy for the longest time, and again, this is coming from a place of I didn't really care that much. I did a lot of what Rob did, and Rob ran 2.5 Minion DHFs. So I ran Minion DHFs, and I loved them. I thought they were amazing. When I started getting Specialized bikes, I started getting a lot of Specialized tires, and I really liked them. The Butcher Eliminator setup just is great, and I thought they work really good. And for me, it's weird because I don't discern that much. So for me, it's just all of a sudden I'm riding and something's not right. And then I look at, well, what tire am I on? Usually an Aggressor or like a DHR or something like that. I only notice it usually when something just doesn't feel right. And then boom, There it is. I look at it and I see.
Well, I think the durometer difference of the Specialized tire from the Maxxis is very noticeable.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah. And it's funny, Cody asks here, if you had to run one tire set between South Mountain to Irwin and Windrock, what would you roll on?
DHF.
Yeah, DHF or Butcher Eliminator in a Specialized. I think that would work.
The Butcher, I used to run the Butchers when I first started racing enduro, and one of the main reasons was because they worked well, they gripped great, and they were like he said, they're available. You go to you go to a Specialized store, they're always in stock. They're the retail $60. They were always a great deal. And when I started riding for Pivot, couldn't run those tires anymore.
No, it's Maxxis only.
Yep.
One thing I didn't think about talking about was when we rode for Pivot, it wasn't in the contract, but it was highly suggested that we stick with Fox on our bikes. How did that affect you?
Well, the Fox stuff's come a long way, but in the beginning, I had been riding RockShox, and I preferred RockShox. And actually, it's funny because in 2017, when I rode some EWS events, I had a lyric on the front of my Firebird with Pivot stickers on it.
That was pretty funny.
Yeah,
that didn't go.
Chris didn't really think so. Yeah,
no.
One day Chris saw me on the trail, and he's like, "Nice fork."
Well, I remember we were at the office once, and I brought all this up, and it wasn't the best discussion. Yeah. It's funny too. I've told this story. I was riding the Izzo, and somebody asked at one point, the Izzo is like a light trail downcountry sort of bike. And I think it was the second ride on it at South Mountain. And I come just ripping down South Mountain. And I'm sure anybody within 4 miles can hear crong, crong as I bottom the thing out. And I come rolling into the parking lot, and there's 2 white sprinters, kind of low key FBI style. And I look, and there's a bunch of bikes and people moving around. And I look closer, and there's Chris Kokalis. And so I come rolling up. "Hey, Chris, how you doing, buddy?" And he's like, "Oh, hey, how are you?" Very happy to see me. Yeah. And anyways, he's like, "Well, what are you riding there?" And I said, "Oh, YT Izzo." And he goes, "How do you like it?" And I'm like, the bike's really good, but man, this fork just sucks, man. I'm bottoming it all over the place. I don't know what the hell to do. And he kind of gets a smile on his face. He goes, "Well, why don't you ask the Fox guys right here? Maybe they can help you." So they came walking over, and they're like, "Oh, you don't like that thing very much?" And I was like, "Oh, it's not that I don't like it. It just, it's bottoming out." And they're like, "Dude, let's throw some volume reducers in it." So they open it up, and they go, "Oh, green. Okay." 10 minutes later, the guy comes out. He goes, "Bro, I can't believe I'm going to say this. I have every volume reducer except these." And it was kind of funny because what I deducted from their conversations were the regular 34 is just a stepchild of a product in the Fox lineup. I could totally be wrong, but that's just what I took from it.
Well, I don't think if they're testing at South Mountain, I don't think they're equipped to be tuning on a 34 probably.
No. And what the guy said was, he's like, "Dude, that bike," he's like, "that fork doesn't belong on that bike. So I think it should have a 36. I said, "No, I agree." And that's what we're going to do. James, you ask a pretty good question, man. My answer is none of the above. I prefer 2.3 in the Specialized tires.
Specialized 2.3 is a 2.5. Everything,
and that's why there's context. 2.3 in the Specialized tires and a 2.5 in Maxxis. What about you, Jay?
I bounced around a little bit. On some of the Kenda stuff, I used to ride 2.6 in the front and a 2.4 in the back. I just like the bigger volume in the front for a little more traction for turning. But lately, I've just been running 2.4s and 2.3s.
It's funny. I used to run the 2.6s for a while, especially up front. I was like, more tire. And what's crazy, what changed that, I think, for me was Cushcore. Going to Cushcore, I just think that for me, it comes back to there's so much traction. I don't think I can override the traction in a 2.3 with Cushcore or a 2.5 Maxxis with Cushcore. I don't need anything bigger. What do you normally running, Rob? 2.5?
2.5 minions.
But you're okay with the 2.3 in Specialized, right?
Oh yeah. If it's Specialized tires, I'm running 2.3s.
Okay.
But I think it also depends a lot on what rim you're running and what the width is as well.
Totally. And that's assuming we're around 30.
Yeah, my bikes are all 30,
internal.
30 plus internal.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the sweet spot now. So anybody listening, we're assuming you're up 28, 29, at least 30 mils. Some people are running even wider.
Well, there's so much nuance to that too, because you're going to get a much different performance with a 2.5 on a 25 mil rim or a 2.3 on a 35 mil rim. It's like it's like low profile tires on a car.
Yep.
You can really affect the handling of the bike, but it's more nuanced. Not everybody's going to notice the difference.
Yeah, so 84 people still tuning in. Throw out any questions if you have them, because we've gone through every one that I had except one, Jason Blodgett. And this last question, this is a hotly debated topic all around the globe, especially on all of my YouTube videos. The question is this, and you have some context to answer this question. Is Bentonville, Arkansas truly the mountain bike capital of the world? And if yes, why? And if no, which it's okay to say that, if no, then why are you wrong? I mean, if no, then why?
So I'm going to say yes, but it has very little to do with the bike riding. It's all of the things that are happening around bikes in Bentonville itself. You see bike brands, clothing brands moving into town. And there's a reason that people are coming to town. A large part of that is thanks to the Waltons and their profound support of cycling and mountain biking in general. So I think there's a lot of things that come from there. And I know just recently USA Cycling hired an ex-Walmart employee, and now he's the CEO over at USA Cycling. So I think it's only going to grow.
Is that Brendan Quirk?
Yes.
Yeah, he was not a Walmart employee.
Okay.
He ran Runway, so that's Tom's.
Okay.
He was close, but yeah, and dude, I didn't know that. I was like, whoa, I can't believe it. That guy's legit. Like, that guy's as high level as they come. Dude, he started. Oh my God, I'm drawing a blank right now. I think Competitive Cyclist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was one of the people that started Competitive Cyclist.
Yeah.
So yeah, dude, that guy, he knows his stuff. How would you rate the trails? How would you rate the riding just across the board?
So I really enjoy it because I like all of the different things that you can do in Bentonville. You guys know my riding style pretty well, and there's some things that probably shouldn't be jumped or transferred and done that we go out there and do because it's all built that way where you can get really creative. And I think creativity helps breed some riders that are going to have success in the future. I think when you look around and see all the little rippers around town, you just know looking at them that one of them's going to be racing World Cups someday. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of other awesome things that are happening in Bentonville as well that make it more than just riding.
Rob, I want you to chime in here. AJ says for riding, wouldn't Sedona be more of a mecca with so much to ride? You've ridden Sedona a ton.
Yeah. So, if you're talking about epic trails, yeah. And if just being on the bike was the only thing you were considering, but from a support of your enjoyment perspective, I got to agree with Jason. I mean, you don't even need a car. All you need is a bike, and you can get to all the trails. You can get to all the restaurants. You can get to all the coffee shops, and everywhere you go, you're going to be passing other smiling faces on bikes.
Yeah.
So the whole town has a pretty, it's a pretty cool vibe. And like Jason said, it's because, the people the Waltons are putting a lot of effort to make it so. And so, yeah, as a person who loves all those things, I certainly appreciate it. And for me, every time I come back, it's all the things that were my favorites are now new. And so it's like coming back to a new place to ride every time, because it's always being changed and improved and adjusted.
Yeah. And one of the cool things too, is it's like, it's for everybody. I think the last time I was in Bentonville, I was there because my dad and a bunch of his buddies were going to ride.
Yeah.
So you have, 20, 25-year-olds, 28-year-olds, whatever it might be out there. But then you've also got
51-year-olds,
50, 60,
Yeah.
70-year-olds out there enjoying the same exact thing. And I think that's pretty rare. I don't think there's many other places where you have such diverse in terms of ridership.
Yeah, and I think that's the point. And the reason to ask you that question, and I just came up with this when I was putting all your questions together. I just thought, dude, you have context. You've ridden all over the world. You're a great person to ask. And it's one of those things where it's not going to bother me if somebody says, no, it isn't. It's an opinion. It's marketing. And I love it. And that's the reason why I say it over and over and over again. And I agree that it's the mountain bike capital of the world. And it's for every reason you said.
It doesn't matter if it's true if you say enough.
I agree. And I think there's a lot of reasons that you could position it as that. Moab's great, dude. Sedona's great. Whistler's great. All those places are great. But, you could have a panel discussion and I think hold this place up. And one of the things I come back to is I don't think as a percentage, the majority of people who ride mountain bikes want to ride Whistler or Moab or mountains for that matter. I don't think most of them do. I think they'd love to ride.
Those people.
I know, but dude, we're outliers. We're outliers in a group of outliers. And I just think that's what it comes back to. Jay, what is your favorite place to ride? Do you have a favorite place to ride?
Ooh, I don't know if I do. I'm not picky when it comes to riding. As long as I'm riding my bike, I'm having fun.
I like that.
And so I don't really care if it's wet and slippery and gross, or if it's 100 degrees or whatever it might be. I got back. I was in November. I was over in Portugal in Lusa, where they had the DH World Cup.
We saw that.
And the trails were just unbelievable.
Yeah.
It was so much fun. But there's so many places I still want to go ride my bike that I don't have a favorite one, but it's the next one.
Yeah.
Nice. I like that. Hariz, Cody, thank you for your super chat. We appreciate that, dude. It's cool to see those things roll in. Earlier, Garrett had a question about misinformation. And I think the context that he threw it out in was somebody posted a video about using, I think it was Tri-Flow or something on calipers.
The pistons and the calipers.
Pistons in the caliper. And how do you deal with...
First of all, what's your opinion about that?
What's your opinion on that? And then how do you deal with misinformation? Apparently that's misinformation. What's your thought on it? And maybe can you speak to what is the party line within SRAM in regards to that?
Yeah. So first of all, it's obviously very frowned upon. Lubing your pistons is something you should never do. You want them to be as clean and as dry as possible when you push them back into the caliper. I could go on and on and on about this. But basically,
I just threw away my Tri-Flow, guys.
Basically, you have a quad seal that sits inside. And so think of my arm as the piston and my hand as the quad seal here. And when it moves through, that's what's forcing it back into its place to give you that pad pocket, is actually that friction between the actual piston itself and the seal that's there.
So you don't want it slipping.
Seal, exactly. People think that's what you need, but in the reality, it's the opposite of what you actually need. But I think we take that to heart. That's our problem. We didn't educate people enough on the product, and and that's why I have a job.
Dude, that's such a Ken Loosberg thing to say like that. I mean, I think that's definitely trickled down. Like he seems like that kind of guy.
Yeah.
And I don't know many CEOs of big companies, but I know the CEO of SRAM, and he is a rad dude. Yeah. It's Rob's frozen face was hilarious.
Do we you want to tell a story about how we met?
I do. Yeah. I go ahead.
That would be a good one.
Go ahead.
If you want. Okay.
I want you to take it.
So I was riding with one of my good buddies in Phoenix, and I ran into Rob out riding. I think we were at the waterfall. I'd kind of known who Rob was, and we just got to talking. A couple months goes by, go back home, do whatever. And I want to come to Bentonville to go and just ride. And I saw that Rob was out there. And so I texted Rob, and he's like, yeah, we're out here. It's like, are you coming to race? I said, didn't know there was a race. And I think, Rich, you were hurt at the time. And so day before the race, I think they sent your entry over to me, and that's kind of how we got to meet each other, which is pretty funny.
Well, dude, it was crazy. Rob's sitting here, and he starts going back and forth. We're sitting at Onyx, and he's going back and forth with you. And I'm like, what are you doing talking to that guy? Because I'd followed Jason on Instagram. I was just a fan because I've never seen anybody do what
you would send me his post to be, dude, look at this guy's style on an XC bike.
Look at this Joker on a fixed post with his Lycra on. That's just wrong. That goes against everything that we know about. But yeah, it was crazy. And all of a sudden he was here. And yeah, dude, you smashed that race down at where the hell was that? Mount Kessler.
Mount Kessler.
Yeah. It was crazy. That was funny, dude. I remember that. That was a great week.
I gotta pull up that video. So in that race, on a couple of occasions, I mean, Jason's faster than me. And so on a couple of occasions, I decided I'm going to start with Jason so he can kind of tow me through. And so we take off on this one stage. We make a quick right turn. He gets up out of the saddle and just starts sprinting and taking off from me like I was in reverse. And it's so, and you hear in the camera me go, holy shit.
Yeah.
And he's gone.
Yeah.
And it's so stark in the video, just how fast he takes off from me. It's silly.
That was pretty funny. And Cody, I don't know, dude, this might be a possibility down the road of a specific colorway. If anybody would be down to make it happen, I think it would be SRAM to do some sort of custom partnership. But talking about colorway, I just got Sarah. She had a great Christmas this year and the next couple of years because she got herself an S-Works stump jumper. So the full axis suite. But dude, one of the things that she noticed right away was the polished, or what looked to be polished, brake levers and calipers on her bike.
The limited shiny ones, huh?
Limited shiny ones. Do you know anything about those, Rob?
I do. I know that there was a problem with anodizing or painting or something. So I said, well, let's just make this limited. Genius strategy. I love it.
Dude, it's genius because it looks really cool and she digs them. So Garrett has one that I just saw pop up. How does bad mechanic practices affect people's perception of your brand? Oh boy.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously there. And there's a couple ways you could go about it. You could say that we made the product too difficult to work on or too difficult to set up. But I think over time, if it's a reoccurring thing, I think people start to realize that it's potentially not the brand or whatever company or the product. It might fall back on that bike shop. And it's all possible. It could be a combination of everything. It could just be a perfect storm. So, I mean, there's always going to be that. There's nothing you can do about it. Ford makes 1 million cars.
I was just going to say, I think you get the Ford versus Chevy thing happening no matter what.
Well, exactly. And you guys don't hide from those things, you know, the brake issues. at one point. Those were fairly prevalent, and that was something that was understood. You have suppliers, and if the supplier gives you a bad batch of parts, that's a bad thing, but that's going to come back on you. The people aren't going to go, oh, those XYZ sleeves inside the brake are the bad thing. It's not SRAM. SRAM didn't do that. Nobody knows that. And I think that's difficult to deal with. And I ran across a lot of people who talked about how finicky Eagle drivetrains were. And what was funny was I never had that issue. And I can tell you,
if your axle's loose, it's finicky.
Yeah.
If it's finicky, something else is wrong. It's not a problem with the drivetrain. Something else is wrong.
And that's what I came back to. And I can tell you, a lot of the people who talked about having issues, they were really hard on their stuff. They smashed their derailleur off different things.
Shifting under load like maniac.
Shifting under, just crack, smash, crunch. And, that piece alone, I still just don't understand why people think it's okay to shift while you're pedaling. Like I ride with some people and the sounds, they just, it's like they make my heart hurt so bad, but they do it.
Well, it's not
okay
while pedaling. It's while literally standing on the pedal.
Yes.
Just
while
mashing.
Heavy pedaling.
Yeah.
I got to put Jimmy's comment up here because he says he thinks this is one of the best real talks that we're doing in mountain bikes. Dude, I appreciate that because that's exactly what we're after. Like moving forward, that's the whole goal. And I'm going to throw this out right now. I don't know how well it's going to go.
Is it going to be a righteous rant?
It's not going to be a righteous rant, but it comes right back into this being real. And you got a message from somebody about a measurement the other day. And what it said is they should be on a size small from 2001 or something. Mm-hmm. And it has to do with a measurement. And the person who came up with that measurement, I want to reach out to them. I want to put it out in the ethos and see if they'll come on here just like Jason is.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it out in public. I would make that contact.
I don't think it'll discuss it. I'll try, but I don't think it'll work. And I want it to happen because I don't think this person's a bad person at all. And he comes up a lot. And I would love for you guys to be able to talk it out.
How many? I don't even want to say that.
And Austin, man, I agree, dude. If you don't use the B tension tool, it's going to be finicky. And
hey, on that note, the white tool.
That's the new one.
Yeah, the new white tool is very awesome. It's very easy to use.
Well, that's the updated for the 52, correct?
Well, there's the purple. There's the purple one for the Axis.
Yeah,
but the white one. Am I correct that the white one works on everything now, like all the Eagle stuff, right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, so we tried to make it a lot easier, so you don't have to have 4 hands to try to set.
Yeah, the fact that you can kind of just clip it on there and it holds itself is pretty nice.
Yep.
So somebody on here said they were about to get Axis. Is there anything that they need to know? AJ, here it is. Going to be getting Axis shifting. Any things to look out for? Things to make it better after setup. You have any input?
Ride the bike. That's all. You're going to be blown away. It's awesome.
Yeah, set it up and go.
Charge the battery.
Yeah, it's amazing. I guess one of the other things, download the Axis app, check to make sure your firmware is up to date.
Yeah.
There's a good possibility that it's probably not up to date just with transit and those kinds of things when it's left our factory versus when it actually gets into your hands, especially with everything going on right now. So it'll definitely help. It'll in some cases, some of those updates have pushed out to increase battery life. And so those are just some of the things to always stay on top of. But once you get it set up and ready to go, it's so bomb proof.
Yeah, but carry spare batteries. It's so funny. Angel throws that out. When we were in Colorado Springs doing our TRS clinics, I can't tell you how many times somebody's like, oh, my battery died. And it was like, whoosh, Wild West, dude. Somebody had an extra one right there ready to go. It was like batteries flying around everywhere. Because I mean, at that point, I'd never been in any one place with more people that had an Axis drivetrain and dropper. It was staggering. And man, I never felt like I got to have this. It's no big deal. I got to have it. Now I just like, I have to have it, you know.
Well, if you're linked into the Axis app, Jason, can't you see what the battery life is?
Yeah. And you can
Or is it
always
just the derailleur battery? Does it show you what the life on the controller battery is too?
Yeah, it's just going to give you an LED notification whether you're green or
Gotcha.
yellow or red, flashing red. And that's going to be the same in the app. It'll let you know.
How about this one, Jay? Old B Cannon here has been running a SRAM Black Box 20th anniversary 9-speed derailleur for years on his 08 demo. And it's indestructible.
Yeah,
08 demo,
man.
Rob. Did you have one of those? What did you have in the early days? You had a stump jumper?
I had an Enduro.
An Enduro.
I had an 08 Enduro.
Man, early days. Way in the early days. All right. Well, I think we've done some good things
dual
here.
crown fork on it. That was when Specialized was doing their own thing.
I remember that long time ago. I remember riding that thing a couple times and trying to find as many stairs as I could in downtown Tempe to ride. I thought this is cool.
I would never ride a bike like that today.
No,
I am not crazy. Nostalgic for that jug.
No. I can't tell you how many times I've told people we live in the best times for riding bikes right now. Like people pine away for this and that years ago. You can have that. I want no part of that Specialized hard rock, full rigid, triple biopace ring up front that I had back in the day.
Yeah, nope. I see people posting like these bikes they're restoring, and I'm just like, yuck.
Yeah.
No thanks.
Yeah, not cool. I think, man, an hour and 41 in. I think this was good. I agree.
It's always a pleasure to see Jay Blodgett.
It is, and I think we accomplished what we set out to do. Hopefully we answered some questions, gave people some insight. I'm sure there's going to be more. If you're watching this now, or you're watching it later, or you're listening to it on Spotify at some point, it's going to be a while. This is going to take a couple weeks at least to get up. Send us questions. I am at the Rich Drew. Rob is at the Rob Drew, and Jason Blodgett is simply at Jason Blodgett, I believe. So very easy to find us on Instagram. So if there's a question that wasn't answered or something that you think later on, shoot that message. Let us know. Jay, do you have anything you want to close with, man? Anything we should know about? Things to watch out for?
Oh, Rob, who's your pick for Supercross this weekend?
Oh,
A1.
Well, on the lights, it's not Jet Lawrence. I can tell you that.
Unfortunately, I love that kid.
Yeah.
Dude, did you see the video with the audio?
Yes,
no.
Not good.
Oh, dude, he comes off just full instant panic rev and smashes himself.
Yeah, I saw him smash himself. It looked painful.
I'm
gonna say Cooper on 450s.
Hey, let's just say thank you to Bill. He was hanging out watching the whole thing.
William Truth, thank you for hanging there with us, buddy. I miss you.
Thank you for being rad. I don't know if you saw his comment earlier. He said, "What? No beignets?" We'll tell the beignet. We'll tell the beignet story next time.
We need to share the video.
Yeah,
video tells
I'm gonna go Cooper Webb, and I'm gonna go sleeper in the lights, dude. My man Christian Craig. I'd like to see him come back and get a win.
I think Hunter Lawrence in lights.
I'm going Joe Shimoda in lights.
Oh, hey dude, yeah. I hear he's ripping.
I would love to pick my guy AC somewhere.
Nope, he's hurt.
But yeah, not looking good. So I'm gonna mix it up, and I'm torn. I'm between Barsha to win again at A1.
That's true.
He does
have a precedence. I gotta say, I should not underestimate him.
I think I'm gonna go Chase Sexton.
Okay.
Yeah,
I like that.
There's a lot of people to choose from. It certainly there's easily 5 guys and maybe deeper who could win.
I thought we were done with questions, but this is my buddy Troy. Does anybody know what a comb filter is?
Comb filter.
It's like old school beatbox stuff, dude. He told me about it. He's all into like 808s and whatever it is, dude. He's got that full thing going on. Jay, do you know what Axis XPLR is?
Yep. So that is our adventure gravel lineup of products. So
okay.
There's a short travel 27.2 dropper mixed in there. There's gearing options, so a 1044 cassette. And then we also make a short travel gravel fork. So anywhere between 30 and 40 millimeters. It's called a
Short
Rudy.
travel gravel.
Short travel gravel. So Troy, or comb filter, you let me know what questions you have with that, and I'll filter them directly to Jason Blodgett.
You'll comb filter them?
Because he's one of my best friends. He gets that. Okay, we got our A1 picks. Somebody already asked for a repeat with Jay Blodgett, and we will get you back at some point, dude. The list is long and very distinguished of people who are looking to get on and rant.
People who are
with
lining
Rich
up to rant with
and
Rich.
Usually Rob, but we're definitely going to get you back. Rob, do you have anything that you want to close out with as we head into the new year here?
I just want everybody to get out and ride their bikes. I feel bad for everybody who's living with white powdery stuff on the ground and can't get out and ride because it's too cold. But in your honor, if you can't ride this weekend, I will ride for you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I want to give a thanks to the sponsor of this show. Did either of you know we have a sponsor?
I did not realize we were sponsored this evening.
We are sponsored. I just want everybody to know that the Ride Series MTB Skills Clinics is now building out its 2022 schedule. We'll be starting in Houston, Texas, first weekend in February. From there, we'll be traveling to Phoenix, Arizona, and also San Diego. So if you'd like to, as Rob says, be better, go to the rideseriesmtb.com and check out the schedule to find out where you can make the best investment that you can make, and that's the investment in yourself. So, we're going to go with the Ride Series being the sponsor of this.
Nice.
Moving forward.
Good call.
There's already been some sponsor talk, dude. It's pretty funny. I didn't realize that would happen so quickly, and I had to tell a couple people, pump the brakes. We're not there yet. We're gonna see where this goes. We're gonna see what develops before we start bringing in a sponsor, because I don't know what it's gonna be. Might be is that bourbon behind you? What did you say, Jay?
Yep.
Yeah. It might have like a bourbon brand or something, Black Rifle Coffee or something. I don't know.
Love that.
I don't know. Thank you, Garrett.
Fascinations.
The A+ ad reach. I'm trying to get my radio voice. It is 2 for Tuesday. The Ramones, gabba gabba wee, gabba gabba. Yeah, maybe Onyx. I don't know. We'll see. All right. Yeah, that's cool, man. I'm happy that we could make this happen, Jay. It's been a long time coming. And thank you for everybody who's been staying awake. I know it's a little bit later, but check out the link below to the new podcast on Spotify. We're taking all of these old lives and putting them back up as podcast episodes. So in a couple weeks, this one will be up there. So you'll get to relive all of the magical 1 hour and 48 minutes. Yes. All right, Jay, do you have a sign off, or are you just, that's it?
Peace out, dumpers.
Oh,
nice.
That'll work. Rob, do you want to give yours?
Over and out.
I got nothing. We're done. Good night, everybody. Godspeed.